Welcome to the show, Max. Welcome to Athens, Georgia.
Well, thanks. Glad to be here.
Got up bright and early this morning to join us.
Yeah, 4 a.m. Total change of scenery here.
Yeah, met Max. I guess we'll a little bit of background. This will be the first episode we release. We're going to record a lot of content over the next 2 days. That's the plan here. Max flew to Athens, Georgia. I met you almost a year ago.
Yeah.
You're my first guest on the podcast. Episode 44 of the Sweaty Startup. It has been the most popular episode by far of the show, where he talks about his moving company, some marketing that you've done, some creative marketing. And in that episode, you brought up Never Split the Difference as your favorite book. So we're leading off, talking a little bit about Never Split the Difference, which is a game-changing book. Yeah. We're going to do our best to cover as much as we can here in about 20 minutes, but the bottom line is I've read this almost 3 times. Still, I realize how much I forget. The mind is really bad at holding things in. So you got a book of notes. I have some notes as well. Let's talk about some of the key points that we love about this and how we've used some of them, some key takeaways for people, and go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so, I mean, this book, basically, I use small little bits and pieces in everyday kind of little, negotiations and larger ones as well. I did a little review before we got here, and it kind of made me realize, like, oh, that's something that I do. I didn't even realize I read in this book. And like I just told you before we started recording, I noticed someone use a negotiation tactic from this book last week on me. And it kind of was a little bit upsetting because it works so well, even though I knew that it was from the book.
You might as well tell them exactly what that is because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so someone basically, I was working on a deal back and forth for this system that deals with like moving company quotes. And it was a few days before I'd responded, or since I had responded to this person. And they sent me a message that just said, "So are you giving up on this project?" And that's a direct line from the book. And immediately I wanted to respond, and I realized it was from that book. So I just responded and said, "That's a great sales tactic."
And so, yeah, if somebody's dragging their feet, if somebody is slowing you down in a deal, not responding to your emails, instead of sending them some long-winded, again, trying to keep the negotiation going, send them one question, one-line email. Have you given up on this deal yet?
People hate feeling like they're giving up on something.
Reminds them of their New Year's resolutions to lose weight, I think. That's great. So my key takeaway from this entire book is how emotional business is. How emotional not just negotiating. I mean, I think of everything in life as a negotiation. I think of dealing with friends, dealing with family members, running a household now that I'm married with kids. Everything is a negotiation, let alone the business deals that are actually dollars and cents. Right. Being an agreeable person, feeling like everybody gets a win out of a deal is the goal for all of us in every part of life. So the emotion of it is just so critical. I think the main thing that Chris says here early on is, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, negotiation was looked at as logical beings acting in logical ways. And what the FBI started to realize when they were dealing with these hostage negotiators is that it's far, far from logical, and that it's almost always emotional. There's almost always hidden things at play, and there's almost always things that you can do to tug at somebody's emotions to get them to bend to your way and to help kind of make a deal happen.
Right. Yeah, I think we all think we're more logical than we really are, and that we're less swayed by random things than we really are.
And you realize that when somebody says something that upsets you, I realized like this book actually hit me kind of like the Stoicism books that Ryan Holiday does of like trying to keep your emotions out of things. I realized when I kind of lash out or get upset at somebody who's disagreeing with me or somebody who has offended me or somebody who has said something unreasonable to me, I realized how poor of a decision maker I am right then and how likely I am to just word vomit information that is detrimental to my case. All right, so do you have any key takeaways before we dive right in?
I mean, the biggest one, like you said, is for like everyday little negotiations that happen or little tense situations. And the thing that I've used the most from this book isn't even business-wise. It's just labeling how someone else feels. I've been in more than one argument where I label how they feel. And basically the concept is you kind of just guess why you think that person is mad. So you can just say, it seems like you're not feeling heard. And it doesn't really matter if you're right or wrong, because if you're right, they're going to agree and say, yeah. And basically they don't have that point to argue anymore. If you're wrong, they're going to correct you. And then you're able to understand why they're upset and then kind of work on, finding a resolution. And it works like amazingly.
Makes people feel understood.
Yeah.
I think like when you say, Max, I feel like you think I'm taking advantage of you.
Right.
Then they say, maybe I'm not, maybe I don't feel that way. And they kind of try to talk themselves down a little bit. It calms the situation, in my opinion. And I've done it many times as well. many times with employees, with friends, with coworkers, with people that you're doing a deal with.
Right.
It just keeps the emotions out of it so that people can be less heated. And anger is bad for almost every situation.
Right. And like you said, sometimes they talk themselves out of their own anger. Like they're doing the work for you.
Yeah, I think Chris has a story in this book where they're trying to do a deal and they label a situation and like they just start negotiating. It's like when the big company is trying to come in and cut the contract deal on the smaller companies. Like you feel like we're the big conglomerate coming in just trying to steal your bottom line. And they're like, no, we understand that you're just trying to do what's best for you.
You're just doing your job. Yeah.
So something that I love is the labeling, like you said. And another thing is active listening. Just the way, again, making somebody feel like you get it. Like you understand their constraints, like you understand what they're trying to get out of it. And this active listening is something that I experienced very personally in a recent self-storage negotiation where I've basically been cold calling self-storage facilities trying to get them to consider selling their property to me. Max and I both know how hot the self-storage market is. If it hits the market, it's going to go for an insane cap rate. It's going to get bought by Public Storage, Extra Space Storage, whatever. So I'm just a small guy. And my only real tug at the heart is to be likable. And so I was in an office with this lady she just lost her husband 9 months ago, and she just wanted to be understood. Like she wanted somebody to care for her business. And I didn't learn all that if I would have just talked about me and tried to pitch the sale to her.
Right.
I went in and I just asked her question after question after question and listened intently to her and stared her in the eye and made her feel like I was actually hearing her and understanding her.
Probably the first person to listen to her problems. And
she talked for 2 hours. We sat in her office for 2 hours. Some customers came up, some customers knocked on the door, and I just kept the conversation going on by, customers can be really needy, or this can be a really hard business, or it can be a great business when this happens or that happens. And customers are important to me, and I can tell that's important to you. And I would just kind of open the door for more and more and more talking on her end, which was cool.
And that 2 hours probably earned you so much in 2 hours versus...
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully we'll get it under contract. We're still negotiating this deal. It's taking forever, but that's again part of the active listening of getting somebody going on. But yeah, it's invaluable. Just building that rapport of guys in my office who's going to actually listen to me. It's not just out to
and kind of carry the reputation on. I'm sure they have customers that they've known for 20 years and want to make sure that they're getting taken care of as well. Yeah, that's huge.
Yep. So we got, let's see here.
Yeah, another thing is calibrated questions, and that kind of goes along with the labeling a little bit. And basically it's asking like a how or what question to someone's offer. So basically someone gives you an offer, and then your counter is, well, how am I supposed to afford that? Or how am I supposed to make that happen? Forces them to explain their self and kind of backs themselves into a corner and makes them realize, oh, maybe I do have more to give, or maybe this actually isn't a good deal, because it kind of catches people off guard.
Yeah, Chris does it multiple times. That's his first question to every single hostage. The hostage wants the money, and he says, how am I supposed to do that? Right. That's his main number one negotiation tactic is, how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
And it infuriates the most brilliant people. Like he got in the room with Harvard professors to do this little test, and they said, okay, we got your daughter. We want $200,000 or she dies in 5 minutes. What do you do? And he goes, well, how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah. Because what are you supposed to say to that? Go get the money. Okay. Well, who am I supposed to get the money from?
How do I know she's alive?
Yeah.
This is another one of his favorite questions. Yeah. So if somebody's trying to do a deal with you, a very quick response that you can say is, how am I supposed to make that happen? Or in what way am I supposed to do that?
Yeah. And there was another example that goes a little bit further after they give a counter. Like I think there was an example with rent. A landlord increased the rent from $1,200 to $1,500, and the example was, okay, well, how am I supposed to afford $1,500 when all I can afford is to pay $1,200? And they're like, well, I guess we can drop it down to $1,400. And then he kind of expanded on that. He's like, well, how am I supposed to pay $1,400 a month if a similar apartment is still for rent for $1,200 a month right down the road? And then you just kind of keep that cycle going to try and reinforce and get them to back down a little more and more.
I love it. So mirrors is another huge part of the book.
Yep.
And mirrors can be your body language. It can be the way that you stand like them. You can shake their hand like them. You can hold your body like them. The voice inflection can be similar to theirs. And another huge part is to just pick the key words from what they're saying. Like if they're trying to make a point, you just pick those key words and kind of lead it on with a question.
Right.
and keep them talking.
Yep.
And it basically just keeps them spewing information, just keeps them talking and talking and talking and talking with a simple question.
Right. So
an example of this, I've been trying to look one up, and I can't really think of one off the top of my head, but somebody says like, Max, this podcast is really important. You got to focus. And you're like, this podcast is really important. Mm-hmm. And then they just talk more. Yeah. And then you pick out the keywords and you add a question and they talk more and more. Mm-hmm. And basically they found that the key to negotiation is to keep the other person talking. Yeah.
You're basically, just getting that more and more information. You're kind of whittling away at what they really want. You could even say, why do you feel the podcast is so important? Mm-hmm. And try to like force more of an answer out of there. Because a lot of times what people are asking for isn't really what they want, is what we're tending to find out.
Yeah. That's the key of the book is what you think they want and what they say they want is not at all what they want and need out of a deal.
Sometimes they don't even realize that.
Yeah, and it goes into, I think you had a really good quote that you picked out of the book from loss aversion. Of people are scared to lose a lot more than they are happy to win the same amount.
Right. Yeah, and they said, this is a quote from the book, real leverage in negotiations is not delivering what the other party wants, but convincing them that they have something concrete to lose. So as you know, everyone, the pain of losing $100 hurts a lot more than the joy of earning $100. Mm-hmm. So if you can kind of focus on what they have to potentially lose in that deal, then you're more likely to make a deal and make them feel a little bit of pressure in settling the deal.
Yeah, and you had that happen with a house that you were trying to buy.
Yeah. So I was purchasing a house, and I was in a situation where I had a lot of information about the seller because I was currently renting the house that I was looking to purchase, and I was in a position where I was pre-approved. And basically, I had all the bargaining leverage because I knew if I were to buy the house from him, it wasn't going to go on market. He wasn't going to have to use a real estate agent. With me, I was pre-approved. I could go buy any house, and it didn't really matter to me which house I bought. So I knew straight up front that I was, had the potential of $30,000 or $40,000 to play with that he would save just by selling it to me, and I knew I would be able to capture most of that if I played it right. Mm-hmm. And there was about 3 different meetings of negotiations where the first one I set the anchor super low, and he was just basically like, wow, no, there's no way. And then, came back, he messaged me a couple of days later, and he was like, well, what do you think about this price that was still, way off from what my low anchor was? And I was like, well, let's meet again, maybe we can try and work something out. And I think at that point I'd gone from like $325,000 to like $340,000, and the house was worth about $390 at the time. So I was still way below market, and I just wouldn't budge above $350. We ended that meeting basically getting nowhere. And this was also someone who had never been in a negotiation probably in their life, especially for that amount of money. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of like closing down and didn't really know how to deal with the negotiation. And a couple days after that, he offered me a slightly lower price, I think like $380,000. And so I brought the price up to $360, and he was like, let's meet one more time. Let's see if we can figure something out. And then I found out in that third meeting that he did not want to go below $370 because that's what he had bought the house for 12 years prior, and just couldn't emotionally let go of that price because he's like, you buy real estate, you expect it to be able to sell for more, especially 12 years later. So I said, okay, what about we do this? We'll do the sale price at $370,000, but you pay $10,000 of my closing costs. So basically I'm buying it for $360, plus it's easier to buy for me at that point. And he gets his $370 sale price, so he can have that like mental gratitude.
Which meant nothing, but for some reason that sparked his loss aversion gene that didn't want him to lose that.
Exactly. So he went with the deal, and we closed it like 2 weeks later.
Yeah, it's amazing that you mentioned that you were in a negotiation with somebody who wasn't used to it, because I find that so incredibly like stark, the difference between somebody who has done it and somebody who hasn't, because it's so uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It is incredibly uncomfortable to be sitting across from somebody and talking about money.
Right.
And what's even more uncomfortable than that is silence when you're doing that. And I love it.
Yeah, I try to relish in it.
I love it.
You try to reframe your mind, like your heart rate's going up, and it's like, okay, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. That's what I try to tell myself.
Yeah, and it is scary. Like walking into the deals, I'm scared. Walking into the meetings, I'm scared. My palms are sweaty. I just want to leave. It's uncomfortable. My lizard brain in the back of my head that Seth Godin talks about, it's like, get me out of here. But you walk in, and if you can just be calm, cool, and slow. Like if you're slow to respond, if you're slow to talk, if you're slow to think.
Yeah, you just lean back like, this is no big deal.
It helps so much. Just the silence, and just sit when somebody asks you a question, just to pause. Even on the phone, it's so
right.
so effective.
Yeah.
To just pause.
Yeah.
And then hit them with the, how am I supposed to do that?
Right. And that's another point in there, is to take it slow, because if you're on the other end of a negotiation and someone's talking fast and moving points fast, it makes the other side nervous and agitated and, doesn't want to be there, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But you also don't want to push too hard, because there's another point. There's 3 types of yes, and the first type is a counterfeit yes. And basically that's a yes you get from someone when they feel they're backed into a corner and they have nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically a fake yes. That's why they call it a counterfeit.
The old sales pitch fake yes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this is geared around sales as well. Incredibly active towards sales.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah. So yeah, that was the first type of yes. The second one is a confirmation yes, and that's like a reflexive response to basically any yes or no question. And the third one is a commitment yes, which means they're saying yes and they're going to take action, which is the actual one you want to get.
And they feel good about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the key too. You want them to feel good about the deal. Mm-hmm. Also, it's not about just like trying to take advantage.
Yeah. It's I found that so many aspects of this also deal with heated situations. So many aspects of this book, and I'm going completely off topic, but it's like one of my friends actually called me and was like, Nick, I'm offended about something. I don't know what I should do. I was at this pitch. I gave a pitch, and then somebody came up to me afterwards and wanted to give me a big critique of what happened. They wanted to give me a bunch of feedback, and it was all bullcrap, and it just made me feel bad about myself. Mm-hmm. What should I do? Like, should I give them a piece of my mind? Should I, part of me wants to run away from the situation. Part of me wants to just turn around and message the professor of that student that said these mean things. And what I've noticed is that it absolutely never a positive outcome comes from confronting and being emotional after a situation like that.
Yeah. There's nothing to gain in that situation.
Nothing at all.
And both of us have had our fair share of criticism, so we know responding to it just does nothing to help.
Yeah, we get a decent amount of positive feedback that makes us feel okay, but one negative something will just outweigh 100 positive.
It really does.
I guess you got to talk about Black Swan, which is the goal of all this is to get information and to gather information and to feel like people trust you with the information. And I have a story of getting some Black Swan information that just changed the whole dynamic of...
You want to explain what a Black Swan is?
Go ahead. Yeah, you do it.
So basically a Black Swan is the single piece of information, or I guess multiple pieces of information, that could make or break a deal that's besides like the point of money. So the Black Swan in the point of me buying the house would be he was fixated on not selling the house for less than what he had bought it for. Mm-hmm. So it's just trying to find that thing that you can negotiate on in the deal that's besides price point or whatever the main negotiation point.
And it's information that you get that's not it doesn't make sense, but it changes everything.
Right.
It's not pertinent to the deal itself, but it changes everything, and it gives you so much leverage in a negotiation. Mm-hmm. And the story is a project that we're actually closing on next week in Lansing, New York, right in Tompkins County, where we have our other properties. I've been negotiating this deal for 9 months, and they were really high on the price. They won like $450,000 for this little 10,000 square foot storage property. And we're talking to them. I started at like 320. I ran my cash flows, and I'm like, I don't think this thing's worth that much. Y'all are way off. We'll go from there. Somebody's gonna laugh when I say y'all on here because I'm the George is hitting me. But basically, I found out over time through a ton of listening, through a ton of conversations, and actually the realtor spewed this information to me, that this was the last piece of property that a couple who went through a really nasty divorce owned together. It was the last piece of the whole puzzle. And I was able to hold stronger at my top end. Instead of like, maybe it was worth an extra 15 grand to me, I held, I held strong to it, and they accepted it just because they wanted to be done.
Right.
They wanted to be done with the property. And as soon as I got that information, that I knew that this was the last piece of a nasty divorce, I was like, oh my gosh, if I were in that situation, like I want to be done.
Right. Yeah. So if we break that down, you can think, any relationship kind of issue, you just want it done. You want the pain over with. So you can think his patience was going to definitely outweigh theirs by 10 or a multiple of 10 in any given day. And that was another point in this, basically to be patient with the deal, and that no deal is better than a bad deal. And really that deadlines are almost never as bad or have as high consequences as you think they are. A lot of them are just arbitrary, and you kind of make a deadline just for the sake of having one.
And good negotiators push those deadlines and don't meet those deadlines
Yeah.
because it puts the other people in a tougher situation.
Yeah.
When you know, especially if you know someone else's deadline.
Right.
Yeah. So that's black swan information. If you can figure
don't
out.
reveal yours.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's almost, you can't be too dependent on these things. I've been negotiating deals in my student storage business for warehouses when we had to have the deal happen. Mm-hmm. We had to have the deal happen or our whole business was going to fall apart because we were picking up student stuff the next day. Like we needed to move in the next day. And you still have to find a way to not rush the negotiation.
Right. Yeah, people can feel that.
Which is such a tough deal. Those were some of the hardest negotiations. That's what kind of cut my teeth on this whole art of negotiation is dealing with these landlords who, I'm calling on the phone and meeting with in person as a 22-year-old, trying to save tens of thousands of dollars, which was huge to us back then.
Right.
Still is big money. And doing it on a timeline where we were desperate in these cities where real estate prices were exploding was really hard. Really hard. Yeah,
and that's even tough in a landlord situation where they have all the information about their property and other prospects coming in and stuff like that. So you're kind of in the dark on that end.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Overall, beautiful book.
Yeah, can't recommend enough.
Yeah. Anything else we should touch on here? Gotta love it. Just keep going back to it. It's the emotion of it. You got to understand that people want to be heard. You got to understand that you got to get people to like you, to trust you. Gaining trust with them is like being compelling, shaking their hand, looking them in the eye. Mm-hmm. They would rather,
what they say.
When you're buying real estate, especially, people would much rather have a clean deal with somebody they trust, that they know is going to close, that they think is a good buyer, than some shady guy who doesn't answer the emails on the right time, won't pick up the phone, talks weird to them, looks down when they talk to them. Yeah. Things like that.
People pay for certainty, for sure. Mm-hmm. They're willing to pay a premium for certainty.
Yep. So if you can be trustworthy and reliable, that's a huge part of making deals as well.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I think we hit it all.
Yeah. I think that's about all we got on that. Read the darn book.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.